Hello everyone around the world. This is the 8th part of my series on Bitcoin, reducing competition for the serial channels of belonging, Bitcoin modeled as white noise, and the radical parallelization of work in the 21st century. Part 8 is called Where's Walter? Okay, and in previous talks, specifically 6 and 7, we talked about the Cree order of capital, okay, and how to model that according to these very sort of easy to understand, well-defined memes here, okay? So we talked about that part in part 7. So if you need to recap on that, revisit part 7. And the main point is that for engineers to really do innovative good work, they need to take a cybersecurity mindset when thinking about how they use their digital and social networks in order to protect those networks from stagflation imposed by capital accumulators and those acting on their behalf. Okay, so we basically need to protect engineering networks from hackers, and money, when it comes to engineering, can be used as a means of sabotage to sabotage engineering networks. And this is something that the sort of neoliberal dogma of the day is not really taking into account, when in fact it's actually like a very obvious thing, and it's a very good problem for blockchain technology that it can solve. Okay, and then in terms of cybersecurity, using your own keys, having ownership of your own public keys is a great first step. Okay, managing your online anonymity is another basic first step. And then Enzig essentially acts as a firewall and a Walter for you, a warden, when people are trying to get live to request authorization from your project. Okay, so Enzig is going to look after competence requirements and learning requirements, sort of general HR requirements, in order to maximize the amount of good people you let into your projects and minimize the number of bad. Okay. Then in terms of the Cree order and blockchain terminology, okay, we can think of the black triangle here as proof of work-ish, and the purple triangle as proof of stake-ish. Okay. Proof of work type things, engineering, labor, things that humans can manage on a scale similar to the Dunbar number, and proof of stake type things are things we can't manage on a human level, so we invent theories to manage them, such as game theory. This is why John Nash invented game theory, to try and stop the Cold War from nuking us all. But there we have to sort of abstractify away the human side and deal with things in the aggregate in order to draw kind of reasonable conclusions. Okay. And this tends to happen at much greater than the Dunbar number, and it's kind of necessary for us to achieve full Metcalfe value of our global networks. But things like game theory and casinos and games of pure accumulation can also be toxic, and we're not really managing the toxicity right now, I would argue. Okay. So proof of work type things, the deliverables, timesheets, CAD drawings, competence assessments, spreadsheets aren't on there, PowerPoints aren't on there, but they maybe should be, like intellectual property, Git commits, engineering sign-offs, QA sign-offs, audit sign-offs. So signatures are a big thing of people. The signatures of people and machines are a big thing on this proof of work side. And then the proof of stake side, we've got artificial intelligence and algorithms here. I feel we should have more artificial intelligence and algorithms helping the proof of work type people, but right now it's all about financial accumulation and social credit scores and all that kind of stuff. Organized violence, we talked about that, game theory, intelligence networks like MI6, CIA, stuff like that. Like voting is the only thing that proof of stake type thing that's meaningful, that most ordinary people in the proof of work world get to be involved in. Yeah, the people with the artificial intelligence algorithms on the financial markets get to kind of front run people's trades. Like the Robinhood app sends like your trading data to JP Morgan so they can kind of get a front run on Main Street investor sentiment to cream it off the top, and then they can then lobby legislative law to allow them to do that more. So this the proof of stake thing has become kind of self-referential and toxic to the detriment of the proof of work world, and the proof of work world is kind of unable to break through sufficiently to kind of equalize the wealth across society. And I'd argue this is why we have such an unequal society today. So in terms of the most milquetoast example, like converting Ethereum 1.0 to Ethereum 2.0 is like very easy because the amount of Ethereum 1.0 and the deployed smart contracts are like mathematically proven according to the typical blockchain proof of work algorithm. So you can make that one-to-one conversion into Ethereum proof of stake much more easily than you can in real life. I mean, it's trivial, it's just one-to-one, everyone trusts it, it's easy. But in the real world, this conversion is much more messy and much more difficult. And this is what blockchain governance is all about. People talk about blockchain governance, but I don't think they're really prepared to get into the meat of what it actually means. And means addressing some quite difficult issues at the heart of our own psychology, our society, existential questions about what it means to be human, all this kind of stuff. It's a very big marketing and intellectual challenge to get this kind of blockchain governance thing right. And most people are just brushing over it or treating it like My Little Ponies, and it's kind of pathetic and sad. And sort of that's why I'd say this the ICO catastrophe happened, and why no one's really learning from it, and the Bitcoin price goes up, and everyone thinks they don't have to learn a single thing. But sorry, that's not how the real world works, I'm afraid. Okay, if we don't learn from this, what happened before, we're just going to repeat it again, and it's going to be like the Nightmare Circus merry-go-round. So let's try and, with this talk, solve the problem. Okay. And in order to harness, people talk about this collective intelligence stuff at scale. Everyone's talking about this and climate change and stuff to try and sell their blockchain concept. But if we're not converting proof of work into proof of stake reliably, or if we're not doing the governance properly, then it's all just going to break down. And this Industry 4.0 thing will never happen, and we'll just descend into dystopian idiocracy, engineering stagflation, with kill drones and social credit scores. Okay. From a technical perspective, the experts are right that proof of work does not scale according to the requirements of global coordination. So we need proof of stake type things for the global blockchain networks to run this Industry 4.0 stuff. But that doesn't tell us anything about how the work that people will do to survive, which is what most people do to survive. They work, they have real jobs, will be exchanged for stake and vice versa. And this is a recipe for conflict and for the continuing conflict that's already underway to escalate even more out of proportion. Because if we don't tackle this, the best product, the most impactful product from a collective intelligence perspective right now is this 3D printed FGC 9mm automatic assault rifle. Okay, and if we don't do work to manage this conversion from work into stake properly, then collective intelligence will just become a 3D printed assault rifle maximizer at scale. Okay, so we can all agree the proof of stake system is, on a global level, the accumulation system is kind of out of control, and it's leading to massive debt and stagflation, and it's breaking our ability to do engineering, and this is causing violence to predominate in social interaction at scale. Okay, in order for people to make nice things, they need to be protected at a basic level from the general socially competitive accumulation games that go on, and they need reliable ways of converting the nice work that they do, the conscientious work that they do, into staking currency, okay? But according to the basic pre-order of capital now, okay, you don't need to be a genius to understand that we need to do this for ourselves, because no one's going to help us do it. And if we don't do it for ourselves, if we don't regulate ourselves, then we're just going to come along and be regulated by people we don't want to be regulated by. So people talk a lot about the market will regulate itself. Do you know how the market regulates itself? Because it has had people like Henry Ford. Say what you like about the Rockefellers, they regulated themselves. Okay, you had proper industrialists with proper vision, Steve Jobs, okay, that went the extra mile and protected the people around them and had a strong and stable vision and product vision, and sold things that people wanted to buy. Okay, right now there's Bitcoin and a bunch, maybe a dozen other currencies, and then a bunch of fluff and not really much rubber meeting the road, and it's mostly speculation. And in terms of people talking about collective intelligence and Industry 4.0 and blockchain, there's really absolutely nothing, okay? And that's because we aren't thinking about what engineers need in order to make nice things. And first of all, they need to be protected. So we can now imagine ourselves as level 100 Bogdanov engineers, and we're the engineers and we're in control because we know what to do. We can design our own networks that work for us and don't work for the people trying to hack into, break, and sabotage our productive efforts, okay? And in terms of that, because debt is out of control and stagflation is out of control, violence is out of control. So in order to respond to this, states are either implementing social credit scores or sort of extreme financial tyranny type stuff to try and maintain some semblance of status quo. Meanwhile, they're building autonomous kill drones that walk and that fly, that hover, okay? And they're fighting with each other. And, you know, this COVID pass stuff is a wedge in the door to social credit score, in my opinion. But if you disagree, please do say so in the comments, but the thing is, I don't trust the government doing this stuff for our benefit. They're going to do it to maintain a status quo for their benefit, okay? Even people in government wouldn't disagree with that. And we all have our jobs to do, but if we want a nice future, we need to do more for ourselves than sort of just let the government handle it for us. We need to have an Adam Smith attitude and change it ourselves, empower ourselves, okay? And right now, engineers are kind of failing at this, so they're building a lot of crappy stuff that nobody really wants and that's making planes crash. Do you want an Amazon surveillance drone flying about your house, sending, Amazon Echo listening to you, Amazon surveillance drone flying about your house? No, we don't really want this stuff, okay? We don't really want this kind of stupid hat to protect us from COVID, okay? It's dumb, but engineers are being forced into making this crappy stuff just because the stagflation is out of control. And when it comes to making real things like ventilators, we're hogtied. Even though there's open source, we discussed this in previous talks, there's open source ventilators that you can build with $100 worth of parts that you can knock up in a garage machine shop, but all the power of the state couldn't do that. But the power of the state is doing this kill drone stuff, okay? So just remember on which side people's bread is buttered and we'll be fine, okay? And this is how dystopias happen, okay? This is what Black Mirror is all about. It's like we all have our job to do, but when it actually meets at the global coordination level, there's friction and conflict, and people's fears set in, people's egos kick in, and we behave irrationally, okay? And when irrationality and high technology come together, okay, people do this, okay? Okay, that's what they do. That's just history, okay? That's documented human history as far back as you can measure, okay? And if you disagree with it, you can just stop watching now, okay? This is kind of like a fundamental premise, and if anyone disagrees with this, then we probably don't have much in common, and you can just walk away now. But if you do kind of think that there is a threat of this boiling over into a violent outcome and a dystopian outcome, then keep watching, because you're going to be quite interested in what I have to say, I believe. So Initial conclusions for me are that the 3D printed assault rifle is the benchmark physical product of the collection of intelligence network currently. Okay, this is because work cannot be reliably converted into stake at scale due to the global constraints set by the Creator of Power Capital, which promotes stagflation, specifically engineering stagflation, which we have explained in previous talks. Okay, so in response to this, I'm not saying this as like an activist and getting worked up and mad about it and stuff. I'm just saying in response to this, engineers within collective intelligence networks need hard-coded cybersecurity measures in place in order to capitalize upon the manufacture of higher-order pro-social goods and services that aren't 3D printed assault rifles, that aren't kill drones, that aren't surveillance equipment in your own home sending data back to big tech. Okay, for us to make nice things, we need to be protected and we need to feel safe, and like our diligence and conscientiousness is going to be valued in the end. If we don't think that and the fear kicks in at scale and everyone's afraid, then it just becomes kill drones and 3D printed assault rifles and a living hell. Okay, if you disagree with that, okay, what protection measures are in place to prevent Industry 4.0 collective intelligence stuff just devolving into Black Mirror dystopia and violence? Okay, we need to have a safety engineering mindset to this, and less of a kind of an activist versus robber baron like kind of protesting mindset to this. We just need to think more like engineers, take more personal responsibility, and actually use the systems that safety engineering has already set up for us to be proper safety security engineers, responsible people in the world, and solve the problem. Okay, and the first layer of safety is always competence. So in order to enter into this great reset, okay, we're just having this great reset marketed to us now. You know, we got the banker bailouts marketed to us 12 years ago. It's just thrown on us, oh yes, here's this bill for trillions of pounds, you know, the Iraq war, the Afghan war, all these pointless wars, you know, another $1 trillion here and there. You know, $1 trillion here, $1 trillion there, pretty soon you're talking real money, okay? And now all the chickens have come home to roost and they just think they can brush it under the carpet with a great reset. Well, that's not going to work unless we have competence embedded into the network from the beginning, okay? And these measures of competence need to be stable, secure, and reliable, such that they can be insured and exchanged for stake and vice versa at scale and avoid stagflation. Okay, and on top of that, we need a coherent vision in order to parallelize the project scope effectively and manage change, and that vision needs to be communicated. Okay, so just having these sort of industry scions like Bill Gates or Klaus Schwab or Elon Musk sort of strut about selling their used car to everyone is not a coherent vision of how we execute this stuff. It's just people trying to sell us a used car. Okay, and the first thing of a competent engineer is to look a used car under the hood. Okay, and the more we can do that, the better the conversations are going to be. Okay. And therefore, like, if we are being sold a used car and there are things wrong with it, like, how do we manage that risk and like buy the one that needs the least work that can be done fastest? Okay, that's a much better conversation to have than just sort of let them eat cake and rabble. Okay. So the current problem is engineering stagflation as described in part 6. Lots of well-documented pointless jobs, pointless degrees, stuff like that. The Web 2.0 sort of siren server labor economy doesn't measure competence because identities are siloed on specific servers. Okay, this is what makes blockchain great, is people can carry their identities around with them. And what's the most valuable thing a person can carry with them that's associated with an identity? It's their competence at the work they do and the value that they add to others and to the world. Okay, so this is why Web 2.0 tends towards low-skilled, low-wage service labor, Amazon warehouse, Uber driver, Deliveroo, delivery person, pizza delivery person, that kind of thing. and sort of maximizes subsistence, unstaked living conditions at scale. Whereas blockchain can change that. Okay. There's also the problem of during COVID, where's this scientific evidence of solutions coming from? You know, there's no provenance of science, especially at a policy level. It's just they sort of trundle these old fuddy-duddies out from Imperial College telling us one thing one day and another thing another day. Like, where's this data coming from? How is it being interpreted? What are their data science models? Why can't we see them? Why can't they be interrogated by the public? There's lots of competent data people in the general population. Why can't they look at this stuff? Like, Imperial College aren't that great. They're not that special. They're not that clever. Like, what's so special about these people? I don't understand. You know, but it is, and there's so much money at stake that, you know, we need to have a look at this stuff because it's just tearing us apart right now. And, you know, COVID has highlighted, you know, our industrial base and human capital, like, can't respond to prevailing conditions. Over dependence on international trade and debt markets to keep the lights on. You know, the national debt in the UK and the US has just skyrocketed the past 12 months on top of already enormous debts that will never pay off. And this fundamentally threatens national security, okay? This stuff is a greater threat to national security, okay, than this, okay? We need to get our priorities right. Right now, like, people just have opinions. Like, what does your opinion mean in terms of real engineering? I was a real engineer for 10 years of my life, okay? I know major accident hazard facilities, okay? I know what's required to stop major accident hazards from happening, and it drilled into me for a very long time. That's the mindset we need right now. And we need less of this sort of back and forth on social media, and especially censorship. It's just out of control, in my opinion. We don't have the systems to manage this stuff, and we need to get a grip on it. So, but the good news is blockchains are perfect for starting to get a grip on this stuff. Users can, like, 10x the ownership of their economic identities. And build, like, proper professional working networks that act in their interests and are insulated from risk and sabotage. Okay, and right now, like, competence profiles for skilled professions aren't really transparent. They're also siloed within the companies themselves. I know from being a process engineer. At one company, I had a competence assessment with 160 different things on it. And then I went to another company, and that also had about 150, 160 things on it, but they were different. And it's like, not even my engineering institution could give me a standardized competency assessment. So it's like, what is this job? And I think there's a lot of people suffering from that. And if as a 12-year-old we could get an understanding of what the competency requirements of any given profession are at any given time, and the wages of those professions, and some measure of, like, the demand amongst our peers to do certain things, we can make better decisions on how we live our lives. But right now, there's so much essential information that we require in order to make good life decisions that's kept hidden from us for the benefit of people who are claim to be helping with climate change and all this stuff, but they're not. They're just out for money for themselves, okay? And just maximizing transparency and decision making at all levels is what blockchain is designed to do, and this is what this decentralized narrative is all about. It's about maximizing trust and delegation at scale, okay? It's not about the price of Bitcoin. So Enzig is acting as warden on the yellow square, and if you remember from talk 7, sort of gaining network access is a 0 to 1 path. This is sort of like where you type in your username and password to request access to the Facebook database in order to post to Facebook's database, okay? what Enzig is doing is, instead of requesting a username and password, it requests a competency profile, okay, that is validated using blockchain technology, in order to gain access to your project, which is a valuable thing to you. Okay, thus it makes it like 10 times harder if we have this in place for bad actors to hack engineering networks. So, like I said, the first way to think about Enzig is a mechanism for requesting permission to access your network. So you do something vaguely useful, then you request permission, okay, those permissions are issued, and then you have the ability to read and or write and or execute code depending on what those permissions are. These are standard Linux permissions, okay? And on Facebook, this is done via entering your username and password it's in a peer-to-peer way. It's done with friend requests and privacy settings. It's all the same thing, and we can start to incorporate an understanding of this into engineering networks in order to only allow competent people in who are aligned with the vision of making nice things and are not just out to buy people off and sabotage stuff for their own benefit. Okay. A token is fundamentally a permission to participate in a network according to the rules of those networks. Okay, so on Facebook, you get a session token when you enter your username and password, and that is why when you go and visit Facebook later, you don't have to enter your username and password again, because you have this token in your browser that maintains access until the token is deleted or expires. So you'll notice if you like delete your history or delete your cookies, that will delete the session token, and then you'll have to log into Facebook again. Okay, but the problem with Facebook is this session token comes with all sorts of surveillance stuff on top, because the surveillance gives Facebook predictive capability. Okay, and we'll get into that in a bit. Okay, and Bitcoin is the same. So instead of just entering your username and password to get Bitcoin, you also have to pay US dollars to get Bitcoin, and then you have enough Bitcoin to fuel changes to the Bitcoin ledger according to the price of transactions on the Bitcoin ledger. But Bitcoin is fundamentally like a session token or an access token to change and update the world's most dependable information ledger. Okay, and the more we think in this way, the more we're gonna start to unlock what Bitcoin is really for, in my opinion. But you'll notice here, to buy Bitcoin, you have to pay US dollars up front. Okay, but then you don't get the surveillance stuff that comes along with your Bitcoin session token. You're kind of, it's like a free pass in terms of the longer term liability. Okay, and that's sort of the special sauce of Bitcoin, I would argue, from an engineering perspective. So what drives the price of Bitcoin? Okay, demand for those who want to pay to update the ledger to secure whatever information. There's more information than just pure Bitcoin transactions stored on the Bitcoin blockchain. Okay, Factom is a great example of that. Block rental costs, like kind of supply and demand over access to the available block to post your transaction, and then sort of more Ron Paul libertarian things like a gold-like digital money. That's kind of Max Kaiser's thing. That's what he's really into. And then a lot of speculation regarding possible future utility given certain assumptions. So it's like, does this decentralized vision of the future really mean in terms of how we organize ourselves as human beings on this planet? Okay. Well, a great historical example is the counter token revolution of the late 18th century in the UK. The crown was not issuing copper money of the right quality to the masses, such that that money could be reliably exchanged into gold and silver. So what this chap Thomas Williams from Anglesey did is mine his own copper and mint that into his own money, which he would exchange for gold and silver at his offices in Anglesey and London 100% reliably, which gave those who accepted his tokens access to global trade and finance at scale. Because if they very often in the 18th century, people would get paid in copper coin, but the Tower of London would refuse to exchange that copper coin for gold or silver. So you'd end up in this deathly embrace scenario, and this led to like a two-tier economic system of the peasants and the nobility and the bourgeois elite. Because essentially the peasants, because the crown was not providing them with good enough copper coinage to withstand counterfeiting, the crown ended up refusing to exchange the ordinary people's money for gold and silver, and therefore the copper coin would trade in typically taverns and market stalls, but was blocked from engaging in the proper power type of activities, such as international trade and industry, etc., owning land and things like that. Okay, so what was special about these Condor tokens is that they gave everyone access to this red square, and that set up the base layer for the Industrial Revolution to happen, because everyone was on one level of finance that could be reliably exchanged between all levels of society, and this allowed people to pool money and invest in factories and trains and things like that. Okay, and this is what is special about Bitcoin, I think, is that before Bitcoin, to have access to a technology as powerful as Bitcoin would require an enormous amount of diplomatic and operational expenditure, and now it's available to anyone for a few tens of dollars at most. And I know the price of Bitcoin is like $30,000 at the moment, but the price to pin a transaction to the chain is about 50 or something. Okay, and that's incredibly empowering. Okay, and then getting back to blockchain, like in terms of the problem with Bitcoin is that to get access to this ledger, we have to pay money. Okay, the idea from the consumer standpoint with Enzig is that they don't have to pay money to have access to a ledger that will ultimately be quality assured on the Bitcoin blockchain. They can pay in labor, study, education, competence. Okay, we're trading down from proof of stake US dollar currency into labor currency, true human currency. And then if Alice wants to gain access and Alice is competent, Enzig will then give her the access token to give her access to the parts of the project she's capable of doing. Okay. And this is tokenization for normal people with jobs, for most people. Okay, most people interacting with the blockchain in future, in my opinion, will be doing it in this way. Okay, the financialization of it is too technical and too much over people's heads. What people want to do is go to school, get competent in something, and then have access to labor opportunities where they can demonstrate their talent and build a career. Okay, that's how most people interact with the economy. Most people are ignorant of finance completely, and that's sort of why finance gets away with all the things it does. But with using blockchain technology, we can really start to mend this wound that's hurting us so much right now. So the core features of Enzig will be transparent, publicly available, universal competency trees fashioned by teams of experts doing real stuff in the real world. Professional social networking and personal profiles based around competence, continuing professional development, and demonstrated contribution to projects. And we can have Git running in the background of everything. And why Git? Because Git is built on top of a Merkle tree scaffold. So every transaction on the repo has an associated hash. Cryptography is easy to implement, the same cryptography that blockchain uses, and already comes included with Git. And with a carefully crafted UI, users don't even have to know how Git works for them to get the benefit of it. And because of the Merkle tree scaffold, Git and blockchains are a perfect match. And Git and blockchain is perfect for provenance and quality assurance of engineering work at scale. And it is not only 10 times better than what STEM does today in both industry and academia, but it's also a 10x use case for blockchain technology itself in terms of mass participation in the blockchain narrative, which is just too focused on finance and speculation and not focused enough on the meat and potatoes of like what people really do in the real world with real jobs. So and then essentially when we're pushing for the red square, I touched on this briefly before, we're requesting permission to expand the insurable base of capital of those associated in the network, either for accumulators or anarchists. But the great thing about the anarchist block is they're least likely to deny permission. This is why PayPal is easier to scale than Uber, because no one was really doing what PayPal did before PayPal did it. Whereas with Uber, they have to fight the taxi companies in every city they try to launch in. Okay, so if there's no one there to begin with, it's not necessarily that you're an anarchist at heart. It's just there's no one there to stop you doing it. Whereas if you do try and tread on the toes of pre-existing hierarchies, then people will try and stop you. And this is why sort of PayPal has scaled frictionlessly globally, and why Uber always seems to have problems growing its business. Okay. And yeah, the main thing is just to use blockchain to empower ordinary people. Most people have real jobs, and they have those jobs to earn money in order to survive and then to sort of gain belonging and status in society. Like, proven competence is an asset because it ultimately proves to insurers that it's possible to insure your labor above minimum wage and thus give you a proper stake in society and not just kind of subsistence slave labor existence, which is what Web 2.0 siren server labor economies do mostly today. And then this is what supports working class wages in the real economy. Okay, if we're talking about being left wing and all these things, well, we need to give working people digital identities that empower them to prove competence so they can earn more than minimum wage. Okay. And then having this stuff really kills a lot of birds with one stone. Like, employers of skilled labor are often price makers, and they sort of fix wages and competence requirements within their own silos to suit their own aims, which are financial accumulation. It ultimately just has nothing to do with the quality product at the end of it. I think this is why so many engineering companies in the UK have gone tits up, like Foster Wheeler, Carillion. There's many more that are hurting right now, because they've just allowed their core asset, which is their people, to rot over many years and been creaming it off the top. When like LinkedIn is not a universal competence platform, it's just Facebook but for work, and this makes it difficult for us to see peer to peer what the value of our skilled labor is to each other, because that knowledge is being kept within silos and being used against our interests. Okay, and this sort of further cements learned helplessness and institutional dependency precisely at the time when we need to be building more leaders and have more initiative to solve the ever increasing, more complex problems that we're facing today. So in a radically networked world, complexity gets externalized by default, often onto those least able to absorb it. You know, you look at Seattle, you look at San Francisco. the inequality is just so disgusting, and that's because it's their business model. It's just what they do. They're vampiric, and Jaron Lanier describes that at great depth. There are a number of, like, the surveillance capitalism book does it as well. I don't think this is a controversial thing to say anymore. And then in order to manage network complexity, we need to delegate risk management in order to allow for individual capitalization. Not only does this benefit ordinary people, but it's also existentially necessary. Like, we need to be creating more leaders with more initiative and more get up and go, and with more ability to protect themselves, to create higher order goods, to solve the problems, and less time trying to nickel and dime each other with the Facebook's stupid ad model, which isn't an ad model, it's a democratic subversion model, but whatever, Mark Zuckerberg, okay? So it is existentially necessary because of this. Joseph Tainter wrote The Collapse of Complex Societies. The collapse of complex societies, again, is as ubiquitous as the use of weaponry in human history, and we need to be delegating risk as much as possible. Otherwise, we are headed for a very bad place, I would argue. So it is a fact that complex societies collapse with regularity throughout human history. If the complexity of existential risk management cannot keep pace with that of wealth management, then complex societies will decline. However, blockchain gives us the opportunity to radically delegate risk management and thus manage the complexity that we can't manage now at scale. And this is what global coordination means. Okay, it means competence. Okay, it means engineering, project management, competence, and converting work to stake. Okay, it doesn't really mean much else. If you think it means something else, then please do let me know. But I think that's the main thing that it means. Okay, and then Git, but the good news is Git is perfect for this. Git is a great project management tool. It's far better than what most real-world engineering companies use today, and because of its Merkle tree scaffold, it can plug something into something as simple as Factom and generate an immediate benefit. Okay, and we can do this by chains of tokenized Git commits. So we have this originating token with this data in it. Okay, the key of the originating engineer, the hash of the Git branch being checked. Okay, this is a checking cycle that is done in every engineering office in the world. It's just originating and checking. Okay, so you just make a document, you get someone to check it, and then you get 2 signatures on that, and then that makes that document an insurable asset. Okay, this is what engineering companies in the real world already do, and Git can, and plus blockchain can help us to do this so much better. Okay, a hash of the unique project ID and a token ID. Okay, and then you have a check token of the checking engineer. Okay, and you add this data to it. It should all be very self-explanatory. Okay. And then you have a revised token. So the document's been checked, it now goes back to the originating engineer, and the originating engineer revises it, creates a new token in the chain. Okay, and then the checking engineer checks the revision and makes sure it's okay, and then authorizes it. Okay, and what you end up with are these rings of authentication. Okay, and this is a decentralized token mint of situationally valuable capital. And we already do it, we just don't use best available technology to do it, and it's very kludgy, but we can streamline it all down into these rings of authentication using Git. Okay, and this is how it works with the Git branching system. Okay, no changes to Git's core functionality required at all. Okay, this is kind of a system diagram of how it works. Okay, it just plugs into Git very simply, very nicely. Okay, and the point is that your career in your life is a project, and it's an ongoing capital and operational asset to you, and you shouldn't just let people come along and steal it from you. You need to own it as much as possible, and it's your right, it's your God-given right to be able to capitalize upon it as much as possible, and therefore lead in life and become excellent at what you do. Don't let anyone stop you from being excellent at what you do. And Enzig really, my aim is that it will protect people to go and be excellent at what they do. Okay. Enzig is the project management system for your constructive value-adding contributions to yourself and to the world. Okay, we don't have this now, so everything just revolves into shit fights on social media because we're not valuing the good stuff that we do. That's happening in the dark, and the staking system is just so reliant on violence that it just turns into echo chambers and general angry craziness. Okay, if we can focus more on being constructive amongst ourselves and build the systems to exchange those value-adding contributions into stake, then we don't need to spend so long arguing. And the blockchain is perfect for this, and it sets you free to do what you think is right and to do your very best. Okay. Transparency of real-world competency and responsibility requirements. We don't have that today. Micro-targeted competency searches and requests for those looking for new people. We don't really have that today. Micro-targeted continuous professional development, but because we don't have the transparency of real-world competency requirements, we can't really do that very well. And then network protection and security for great people doing great things from power capital, sequestration, and sabotage. Okay, so we found Walter. Enzig is Walter. Okay, and then in part 9, okay, we'll start to, if this is a cybersecurity problem, we'll just treat it as a cybersecurity problem and all the messiness and dirtiness that comes with that, and sort of reframe these cryptocurrency libertarian values in terms of how violence and freedom need to be considered in the real world today, to give us a better balance, and prevent escalation of violence in future, which is what I'm trying to do. Okay, I think we all know we're in a bit of an emergency situation right now, and it's not my intention to yank anyone's chain too much. It's just my intention to draw attention to a potential powerful solution, okay, that could make things better in future. Okay, so thank you for listening to my talk. I very much appreciate all my comments, likes, subscribers, all that stuff, and I'll be back with Talk 9 sometime soon. Happy 2021, everyone.